Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We will unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. If you find yourself sitting on a comma in your life, remember, you can also talk to me without a microphone. To explore coaching with me and getting off the comma in your own life, book a call with me at offthecomma.com. In the meantime, let's get into this week's conversation. And we're back for another episode of Off the Comma. And this week I am particularly excited because we're going to be talking to Trish from the UK. And Trish is someone that I only know remotely. Trish and I haven't really had a chance to meet before this recording. I know of her. She's in a community of coaches and professionals that I'm a part of. And we've interacted in writing and WhatsApp and email and other discussion groups, but never in person. So I'm excited to bring Trish and her story into our community of Off the Comma, beautiful stories about life and overcoming challenges. And I'm also excited to be able to start to get to know Trish for the first time. So I'm going to stop rambling. Trish, I'm going to turn it over to you so we can get started. And why don't you start by telling us, how would you like to be known? And then share whatever you'd like for us to know about you.
I like to be known as generous with my time, with my clients, generous with my knowledge. I like to be known as inspirational, one of the big drivers for why I wrote my book. And I also like to be known as resilient, and resilient from the point of view that I was chronically unwell for 32 years. And I'm now happy to say that I've been medication-free for 22 years. So I transformed my health. And I think that is almost a value that I hold dear to myself, that resilience and stepping into the knowledge that the body can heal itself, and then inspiring others to learn how the body can heal itself is what I want to be known for, and that generosity for sharing that information and the energy that comes in that generosity for sharing that information. So I am now a nutrition gut specialist, because for 32 years I was really chronically unwell. I had asthma, anaphylaxis, shingles, and when I peaked at 12 anaphylactic episodes in 1 year, I knew that something had to change. I intuitively found my way to a nutritionist, and working with a nutritionist over a period of 6 weeks, I completely transformed my health with her help. And prior to that, I would never have put my respiratory challenges and my asthma down to gut health. I was diagnosed with candida, Lyme's disease, and a hookworm, as well as a range of flukes and spores. And I would never have put the connection down to gut health, that my respiratory challenges were being driven by a compromised gut. So that is why I'm a gut specialist, and that is why I'm so passionate about sharing this knowledge and knowing that the human spirit is really resilient in terms of wanting to find a solution to heal. So yeah, that's what I like to be inspiring, particularly other women who may have been told that they'd have to be on medication for the rest of their life, or that they would have to settle for being unwell, because I am proof that that can be not the case.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is, and especially as you talk about, describing yourself as resilient and generous, is, all of this that you've experienced in your past and all of this that you've had to overcome then ended up kind of turning into the thing that propelled you forward and not only moved you forward in your life, but in such a way that you find yourself wanting to share that with others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I've been given the gift of healing and improved digestion and balanced my own hormones and created the right environment for my body to heal. And I really am passionate about sharing that with others. So yeah, I'm so generous with my time, with my clients, because I just know the power of when you create that environment where the body will heal. It is amazing what can happen.
Well, and it sounds like there's lots to share, especially as we dig into, kind of your story about overcoming challenges, being stuck and getting unstuck. So I'm looking forward to hearing your story. And like I kind of already alluded to, and like with any guest, we don't pre-screen or we don't talk about your story in advance. So I'm excited to hear what unfolds. And before we get started, I'd love to ask you the same question that I ask all my guests, which is, as you think about the time we have ahead, the next 40, 45 minutes or so, what would be your intention for yourself for this conversation?
To step into my power and to be able to share with honesty and maybe even a little bit of vulnerability about how it's a real work in progress with getting unstuck from where I am, where I found myself in the last few years. So yeah, just being brave about sharing this story.
Okay. So bravery, vulnerability, and stepping into your power. I love that. And my intention is to support you in that intention and hold the space for you to be able to share your stories with us today. And then hopefully, and that's a bold hope, right? Like I don't think that's just a wish. I really believe that in doing this and in sharing your story today, you're going to connect with people out there who are going to be able to see a little bit of themselves in your story. It's going to make them feel a little bit less alone, a little bit more connected, and in the best case, inspired and empowered to do something that they've been wanting to do. And at the very least, that in feeling connected, all of us feeling connected through these stories, we treat ourselves and we treat someone else in our lives a little bit lighter that day. So that's what I want to help you create today.
Thank you.
Let's get started. Let's jump in with the first question. As you know, I always ask the same 5 questions with every guest. So the first one is, Trish, where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life?
Wow, this took a lot of thinking about because there's so many examples. But one of the most recent and the most challenging really happened in writing my book, which took me 7 years, which seems like a crazy long time to craft a book. But I sort of realize why now, because I think, like so many of us, to experience such significant setbacks in the global pandemic and to have so many freedoms taken away from us, I felt really so stuck, so much so that I had to remove that word from my vocabulary. I had to stop saying it. I had to really dig deep and say, I am not stuck and I'm not homesick because I wasn't sick. Now, you may have noticed I'm a hint of an accent in my voice. I'm not English, I'm Australian. Mm-hmm. And prior to the global pandemic, we were spending 6 months in Australia and 6 months in England, traveling around, sharing juices as medicine. So I had a mobile fresh pressed juice bar. And my husband, who is a performer, he's a professional clown. And our 2 kids had this amazing dream life of traveling the world, traveling between summer in the UK, festivals and events like big festivals like Glastonbury and WOMAD and Boomtown, all these big music festivals, and then going to Australia and doing the same thing for 6 months, spending summer out there doing great festivals, keeping people healthy, making people laugh. And it was an absolute dream life. And a friend of ours stood up at a wedding and said, juicing, clowning, speaking, traveling, there's got to be a better way to make a living. And we're like, well, no, not really. Not according to us. It was a pretty crazy dream.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like a pretty cool way to make a living to myself, and I'm sure a lot of people, right?
Yeah, and 2 kids along the way. You know, one of my younger son was born in the middle of the Edinburgh Fringe, and my eldest son was born in Newcastle in Australia. And so they went to school in both countries, and we did a lot of homeschooling. And in March 2020, that all completely disappeared. You know, it was from one sort of festival cancelling to 10 days later, the whole season being cancelled. Mm-hmm. And our dream life that we'd spent so long creating had disappeared in a heartbeat. And all of our work was public facing. All of our work was events and people. And I'd already started to write my book at this point. And it was a book about juicing and chakra healing, and it was a recipe book really about healing and a bit about my healing journey. So where I really got stuck was what is my dream life, my perfectly, specifically designed, passionate, adventurous life look like now that all that is taken away? And I can no longer travel, and I can no longer do my work. And I'm in the middle of trying to write a book, and I'm now finding myself homeschooling my children in a way that I'd never envisaged, because homeschooling always looked like, oh, let's go to Glastonbury Kids Zone and learn about beatboxing or drumming or some wacky Green Futures project or something, you know, really out of the box. Mm-hmm. And so now we didn't have enough devices in the house to homeschool our children in the way that the school wanted them to be homeschooled. And we were both having to redesign and reinvent ourselves in a heartbeat, in a millisecond, it seemed.
Yeah.
And I really had to dig deep and work out what it was that I wanted to write about, because I was in the menopause. I was having panic attacks. I had already decided to be sober. I was sober all of the lockdowns. I had already changed my relationship with alcohol. That was a necessary thing that I had to do. I was sober curious for quite some time before that. So I was resilient, and I decided that, no, I'm definitely not drinking through these lockdowns. Mm-hmm. Working out what that was going to look like. There was so many struggles at that point, and I had signed this really big contract with my publishers, who turned out to be sharks, who turned out to be very dishonest, and basically took all of that money from me. So having lost the career, lost the businesses, lost the audience, lost our livelihood, I'd also paid $12,000 for this marketing, for this publishing package to a publishing house that was dishonest. And when I first saw the first cut of my manuscript, which I was really struggling to write in the lockdown, going through the menopause, homeschooling the children, trying to keep my marriage alive, I saw that first manuscript, and it was awful. It was so bad. My, at the time, 8-year-old son could have done a better job. And in the small print of this publishing deal that I had signed, it said, as soon as I get the manuscript, basically any change beyond that would cost $70 and there would have been about 1,000 changes needed. And that once I got my first edition of my manuscript, I wouldn't be able to get a refund. So I was like, it was like I had double lost my sense of self and my whole sense of what I was writing about and what I was standing for and what I wanted to bring into the world. You know, I had this amazing life where I was traveling around, inspiring people to be healthy, keeping people healthy at festivals and events, speaking at retreats, I had this book inside me that wanted to come out. And it was just like everywhere I turned, there was these big obstacles.
So, Trish, I'd love to just reflect back some of what I'm hearing so far, because I could definitely hear, just the overwhelming challenge in all of this. I mean, certainly you were not spared the effects of the pandemic like so many people around the world. And yet, your experience you're describing is it affected all parts of your life. It did so many people, but your life was about mobility. Your life was about being out in the world. And then the pandemic took that away. So you had to reinvent, as you said, all parts of your life. And as you also said, like, so many things became that's not going to work that way anymore. You've got to do it differently. And the thing that you were kind of holding on to as, ooh, this is going to be a thing that will be something that I can do and produce and enjoy this book. All these hopes and expectations you had for it, now suddenly someone else has put blocks in the way. It sounds like so much that was just not working for you during this period.
Oh, I was being so blocked. And I was not in my flow. And I'd had this panic attack late one night on it was the 6th of January. And they just announced in the UK that we were going into another 3-month lockdown. And we always thought that, they'll keep the schools open, but they decided to close the schools. So we had more homeschooling. And I was like, how am I ever going to get this book done with all of these blocks? And I was so deep in self-doubt. My self-esteem was absolutely on the floor, and my marriage felt like it was in the bin. My relationship with my kids was just so stressful. And here I am trying to write about being inspirational and stepping into your healing power, and how do you nourish and cleanse and live your ideal, strong, vibrant, healthy life full of vitality, when I was not feeling any of that. I was feeling overwhelmed, stressed to the eyeballs, so lacking in confidence. Like, who am I now that all of this freedom that I had was taken away? Here I am stuck in England, stuck at home, feeling so overwhelmingly homesick. Am I ever going to see my family again? Am I ever going to be able to travel again? And how can I now find in myself to continue to write this book?
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know where to turn, and it just seemed like every block. So I was working with this photographer for 2 years prior to the lockdowns, and I would go and I would make all the recipes with her. I'd go and shop, get all the ingredients for the recipes, and I'd shop for everything, and then I'd go there. It'd be a 2-hour drive away, and we'd make all the recipes, and then we would photograph them, and every recipe would take, hours. And eventually the photographer came. She had some feedback that she wasn't happy with. There was all this grey background in the photos, and I'd shared these photos with quite a few colleagues and people that I respected, and everybody was coming back with the same feedback. Like, the photos are good, but the background doesn't really work. And I shared this with the photographer, and she totally cracked it at me. And she said, if you're not going to use that background, you're not going to use any of the photos. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I can't believe that the publishing house has let me down and the photographers now let me down. And it just seems like this is four years of hard work at this point. How am I ever going to get this finished given my current situation? I felt so stuck. The first thing I had to do was I had to remove stuck from my vocabulary. I had to remove homesick from my vocabulary. And I remember this pivotal point where I did this meditation with the help of an EFT practitioner. So I was doing all this tapping, like I'm feeling so overwhelmed and anxious. And even though I'm feeling overwhelmed and anxious and hopeless and my self-esteem's in the toilet, and even though tapping away. And I reached this point where I was able to visualize myself in this really rocky boat. And in the boat, I was there on my own in these fierce seas, and the water's flying everywhere, and I've got no navigation, and there's storms coming, and such tumultuous, really rocky situation. And I pictured this little image of what came to me was a combination of a leprechaun and Mother Teresa. Mm-hmm. And it was this tiny little leprechaun figure sitting in the boat with me that had the face of Mother Teresa. And all I had to do was all of a sudden step out of the boat, and the water's calmed, and I was in shallow water, and there on the beach was all these people there to help me. And I could see all of these people, like social media people, fans, clients, all there cheering me on, going, no, come on, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And all of a sudden, from that point, I joined the Independent Alliance for Authors. And it turned out that the publishing house that I had spent all this money with had a very high, like the highest advisory warning of any publishing house for really do not work with these people. So I felt like a bit of an idiot, but I also felt that I'm not the only sucker in the world that's fallen for these people. But also what that enabled me to do was very quickly find reputable people that could help me with my manuscript, with my typesetting, with my indexing, with my photos, with my boom, 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 boom. And all of a sudden it really came together so quickly. So from within 2 months of having that meditation, I had my manuscript and my book ready to go, ready to publish.
Wow. That's wild.
So I just think it was...
Yeah, I mean, because like all the people on the beach ended up showing up in your life. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly, the feeling that I had when I got out of that boat and I looked at all these people on the beach was that same feeling that 3 months later I had at my book launch, where I could see all of these people supporting me and all of these people going, no, you are inspirational, and you are, being so generous with your time, and we're here to help you, and you are really resilient, and digging deep that my story was important. My story, even though I was struggling with self-esteem, even though I was struggling with such self-doubt and struggling with my confidence and yes, having to redesign my life, it's like, no, I can do this. I can do hard things. And it was amazing how quickly it was almost like divine timing, like all the procrastination and all the hiccups and all the rocky seas they had to happen in that time, because there was just something much bigger, much more profound in the divine timing of when it all came together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does, or at least to me, as I understand the story, and I just hear again, like I hear so often, like just this monumental, series of challenges and struggles and so forth, and then meanwhile you're moving forward in the ways that you know how and as best as you can, and yet the challenges are mounting, but then there's something that kind of breaks and things start to move and shift. And for some people, it moves a little bit slowly. For some people, it moves quickly. You said you kind of came to this point where everything was feeling like it's just so constrictive. And then things started to open up. And then 2 months later, you really had a lot of movement. I guess what I would ask you, Trish, and it's the second question and a question, right? Is it feels like you've already answered the question, what did all this create for you? But I would invite you to add to that. And what do you think the shift was? What was the difference between where you were and then suddenly 2 months later? You were starting to describe it a little bit, but what do you think changed?
My self-belief and asking for help. And there was a divine timing in that realizing that in the support that I'd given so many other people over a period of time, that it was okay to ask for help, and it was okay to be vulnerable in that moment to say, I don't know what to do. I stood up at a networking meeting, in one of the few in-person networking meetings we had between lockdowns. And I was in tears, just saying, I just don't know what to do. Like, I feel like I need a lawyer. I've been ripped off by this publishing company. I feel completely out of my depth. I want to get this story written. I feel like I'm worthy of getting it written, but I just don't know what to do now. I really feel like giving up, but I just know that I don't want to give up. And it was from that the lady that I was sitting next to actually had a connection with an author, and she had then connected me with the Independent Alliance. And then they had said, I'm sorry, but the publishing house has got a really high advisory warning, but this is what might be able to help you right now. Here's a directory of people that have been vetted that are really good, that could help you. And it turns out the typesetter that I chose is a lady that lives really close to me. And, it came together so quickly when I just sort of, and I think that meditation that I had there was something divine in that was realizing that, no, this is worth doing, and it's worth continuing to do this work, and it's worth finding another way.
Well, and I hear this a lot, and I certainly have experienced it for myself. I can only speak about my own experiences, but what I love about these stories is a lot of times, because we're telling it retrospectively, you're telling your story retrospectively. It's like, oh, it's centered around the meditation. I'd love to zoom out just a little bit and tell us about what's the context. So you had the meditation, that's where the shift happened, but there's also context around outside that meditation. Where were you? What was going on for you? What brought you to the meditation?
A desire to not give up, a desire to find someone who could help me. Connecting with an EFT practitioner. I was in my home. So we were back on Zoom, we were back in a lockdown, and I was in my home, and I just felt like I just can't give up on this dream. So I found an EFT practitioner, and I had this vision of still wanting to get this book out there, that this story was important. So we did some tapping, and I had a couple of sessions with her, and then it was like, well, what I'm really stuck about is this book. Like, I'm procrastinating the hell out of it. Like, I need to get it out there, but I need to find another way. So it's sort of like being open to another way.
Let me reflect something. And then, and with my reflections always, if I say something, it's like, no, that's not what it was. Correct me. This is just kind of what I think I heard. But what I'm hearing is, okay, the meditation was a significant turning point, but really what was happening kind of around that and leading you to it was it didn't sound like you had found any answers yet, or at least the answers that felt like they were going to move you where you needed to, but you weren't giving up. You still had your vision. I'm looking at my notes here for the voice changes. You were still moving forward regardless of the struggle or how you felt. Like I wrote, you kept going, and you were still reaching out for connection. So it sounds like what I think I'm hearing is you didn't know that you were going to find this EFT person and have a meditation that was going to make a significant difference, right? You were still looking for the things, holding on to the vision, and taking one step at a time. And it just so happened that the next thing ended up becoming the thing to start moving things in a different direction for you. So what I think I'm hearing, and you tell me otherwise, is it sounds like there wasn't some magic revelation. It was you doing the things to keep moving forward and trusting well, you didn't say trusting the process, but moving yourself forward and trying new things and holding on to the vision. And you didn't know what was going to be, but it did find you.
Absolutely. Like I think that, the big pivotal point yes, it seemed like it was that meditation, but really that Independent Authors Alliance, where the directory of people that could help me, but also realizing that, when I saw that this publishing house had the highest advisory warning, and at that time I felt so stupid, but I felt so like I felt that I wasn't alone in the fact that they've got an advisory warning for a reason. They're very good at what they do, and they're ripping people off. And that I didn't feel so stupid. Like I did, like it was such a weird feeling that I felt so dumb. And I'm like, oh, my old story of I'm not worthy. I'm so crap at this. This is like, I don't know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I was like, no, they're being dishonest and they've got an advisory warning, and it's not a reason to give up. Like, it's just an obstacle. Find another way to get this story out there.
It's amazing what changes, right? Because I'm sitting there thinking, like, what came up was, this isn't me.
Yeah.
It wasn't me. It wasn't my fault. And how quickly getting that extra data that shines the light on another side of the story that's the opposite of what you were telling yourself, how quickly it can change the story for us.
Yeah.
So all of this is happening together. All of this is happening in conjunction with each other. There's no magic path. It's just all these things are happening and little pieces are moving into place that then start to bring you bits of clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then thinking, well, the time in lockdown, and staying in one place and having that time to do that, because it might have actually taken so much longer if I was still doing 6 months. And, you look back on that time and think, well, perhaps it was a bit of a gift in that staying in one place and having that experience. And now I know that process, and, you've got to find the light in that experience. But yeah, you think, oh goodness, I did feel, like I was so gripped by self-doubt at the time that I really had to think, well, actually I can do hard things, and this is just because it's just an unknown. I've never done this before, and I can just find a better way. I can find people that can help me with this.
Mm-hmm. Trish, that's a perfect segue into our next question, because you're already going there. So what else did you learn about yourself as a result of sitting on this comma?
That the story around my self-confidence and my self-esteem is just a story that comes from, so my being chronically unwell for 32 years is also wrapped up in that story, that not being able to breathe, not having space, not feeling good enough, feeling too unwell is a really old story of mine. And it's part of the unraveling of that story. It's just a story, and that story still holds a lot of strength for me. And so I just have to notice that when that's coming up, that, I can stand as a powerful and inspirational woman who's been through a health transformation, and I can be strong in that voice, and I don't have to be that, that little girl from a country town who's got nothing to give and not, no story that's worth hearing. And, it's such nonsense. But when you come from not being well and not being able to breathe and not being able to do sport and being poorly a lot of your life, then you can easily buy into that story. Mm-hmm. But it's still just a story. And so we can create new stories. We can, but it's still a pathway in the brain as well. So sometimes that still shows up and it's like, okay, she's back again. Okay, honor that side of me, but that's not really true because I've got all this social proof that I am resilient and I'm inspirational and I've done really hard things and I've done a whole series of really hard things. And I'm more that person than the person that struggles with low self-esteem and confidence and can't breathe and can't do things.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really powerful right there. That's a really powerful statement to make.
Yeah, it feels powerful. It feels powerful to share that from a different place, that from 4 years ago. This time 4 years ago was really a dark place for a lot of people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really fascinating to hear people all over, friends, loved ones, clients and guests on the podcast, how similar our experiences felt, in the moment, and how important it was for us to all connect with each other and in a way commiserate. And now here we are, 2024, and we're hearing people tell the story and really focus in on these segments and slices of what life was like for them, and to see the uniqueness. There's the shared experience, but then to see and hear people unpack what was really going on for them is so powerful, and it's so just telling about people's life experiences and journey. It's just really fascinating to be part of and to listen. Trish, what would you say has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma?
I still have to be very careful around my dialogue around feeling homesick. Living in the UK, I have to focus on the positive in every day, and I've done a lot of letting go and just letting God, letting the divine guide the timing of everything, and stepping into being of service and what that looks like the flexibility, like the rainbow serpent, almost that real flexibility that has to happen in life, that whatever challenges are thrown our way, to focus on restoring balance in my life, like making sure I'm focusing on resting and relaxing and meditating and emotional healing to allow the next chapter of the redesign, because I feel like I am in the process of redesigning again my life, rediscovering passions and things that light me up, even though we're not traveling in the same way, but letting go to what that looks like. And that's different for me. I think that I've always been so, I'm in control. I've got this adventurous life and the future's really bright and I've got all these lasting adventures and we're doing this, summer crazy life. And well, now that's all gone. It's like, okay, the rest of my life can be the best of my life and it will look different, but that's okay. Like, it's coming home to me and letting go of what that looks like and just finding the joy in the little things, even though they're just, maybe that adventure is much smaller now. And it's very strange. It's a very strange place to be, but it's just focusing on the gratitude, the positive, and finding all the things to be grateful for in this redesign. And that's why it's still, I feel like a work in progress. Like, I still feel that occasionally I feel a bit stuck on that comma and that longing, the grieving for that old life is okay. It's part of the process. Trust in that process. It's going to be okay.
That's really powerful, because what I'm hearing you say is life is different, and you do still have feelings for and fond memories of, and maybe even longing for that old life. And yet you're also accepting the fact that for now, just that old life has changed. It is different, and you're able to look forward and still allow for the memories and acknowledge the experience that you had with the other life. But you didn't necessarily say, I can't ever have it again. It's just where I'm at now is not there. And I can look forward and look back and experience the feelings, and none of those have to take me to a place of not feeling empowered. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, you've summed that up beautifully. I think the panic attack that I had in January 2021, that was such an extreme, out of the blue feeling. And I'd never experienced that before, and I never really want to experience that again. But I tell you what, if I do experience it again, I know exactly what I have to do. And a brown paper bag trick is a really good thing. You know, if anyone is listening, they have panic attacks, having the old-fashioned brown paper bag, it's a really good effect, good technique. But knowing, just trusting that it will be okay, and it does look different, but different is okay. And just, you know, finding the joy in the smallest of things. I'm getting really good at that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I can hear the shift. And, you know, one question that we didn't really answer. And so I'll ask the question. And then if that's also part of your response to the last question, then that's okay too. But I'm curious, you talked about, you know, after that narrowest moment when things started to shift, you had the meditation and the vision that came to you. And then you said 2 months later, your book was basically finished, but I didn't ask the clarifying question. What did happen with your book? Where did it land? Did you get it out there? I'm just really curious to hear where it went.
Yes. So it is published. It's called Nourish Your Gut for a Positive Menopause. So writing a book about gut healing in the menopause during the lockdown was quite interesting. But yes, it did. It is out there. I launched it. I've launched it in Australia. So I have been back home since then. And I've just had 2 recent book launches in Australia and in the UK. And it is out there. So it has been birthed. And it's something that I'm incredibly proud of, and I'm getting excellent feedback about. And I think that was one of my biggest worries, is like, oh my God, what if people think it's crap? And what if no one reads it? And what if, and then what if it's, what if it's no good? And what if people just rip it apart? And the feedback that I've had is been phenomenal, that it's been really helpful, that it's really easy to digest. It's beautiful. It's got beautiful recipes. The photos look amazing. It is something that I feel really proud about. And I think, that I really had to dig deep in that whole process, that I was not going to give up. And it was worth going through all of those blocks and all of those icky feelings to get that out into the world.
Yeah. Well, and it seems not only is the book done, but all of these things that you shared with us, or many of these things that you shared with us, had to do with elements of the book, and now they're complete. They're done. They're out there. You overcame each of those things, whether it was the publishing, the typesetting, the photography, the backgrounds, right? It sounds like all of that was able to get resolved.
Yes.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Trish, last question. What does getting off the comma look like for you?
Letting go, letting God, letting, higher power, just letting go, to divine timing, to purpose, to, I think I always had such a fixed vision of what my purpose was. Like my passion, my business was my passion, it was my purpose. And now it's like, okay, maybe that's going to be looking very different, but I'm open to what being of service looks like, and who and to who and how, but just letting go of that, letting go of, I'm not in control of that anymore.
You've said divine timing at least 3 or 4 times that I've written down as you've been talking. And, we always operate under the assumption that we know what that means. And I think most of us can connect our own meaning to it. But I'd love for you to just elaborate a little bit more. When you say divine timing, what does that really mean for you?
The magic that, when the timing is right, the magic happens. And when that is not up to us. We can do a lot to influence it. It doesn't mean we just sit back on our laurels and do nothing, but it does mean that, we have, with all the best intentions, sometimes things don't go to plan, or they're not in the timescale that we expect. And, I never imagined that embarking on writing a book was going to take me 7 years. And they were 7 hard years. But in that time, I ran my programs. I ran my programs in my kitchen. I ran them in retreats. I ran them online. I ran them in person. And I know that they work. And I think that there's a divinity in itself that, that all had to happen. in the sort of weird order that it happened.
Yeah. Well, and in that, what I'm hearing, this is my assumption, but I'm also hearing elements of patience and trust and just keep doing it in the absence of knowing.
Yeah.
That sounds so powerful. And it just fascinates me too, because you talk about divine timing and letting go and letting things happen. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about being able to do this work on this podcast is I don't contrive or construct or try to control things. Like the stories are always your stories, but even in terms of how and when the stories show up on the podcast. So for example, today we're going to be airing Julie's episode, and Julie's story is about a book, is about writing a book, right? And here you are also with a story about writing a book. And then tomorrow I'm recording with Janie, and the three of you are all over in the UK. And like, a listener listening to the podcast would say, well, why did he have three UK folks in a row? Or why were there four guys in a row? Or why are there two book stories in a row? And it's never by design. I never do it that way. I literally will, I'm always out talking to people, I've been hounding you, right? About being on the podcast. And
yeah.
And when they show up, I record. And if they're next in sequence, they're next in sequence. So I think I've had one person who said, hey, can we save it for when I want it to air near my birthday, right? Or when I get back from a vacation so I can post. But literally, y'all are all showing up when you show up, how you show up, and then you find your spot. So I don't know what it means. And for all I know, it could be a message to me. Maybe you all are telling me it's time for me to write my own damn book, but I don't know. But this is also like, we can put our own meaning on things. And sometimes they didn't have meaning. And sometimes we assume things didn't have meaning when they actually did. Right.
And it's a synchronicity, right? So, you're having Janie on tomorrow. So my gut healing program won Janie's award in 2020. So there's, look, and when I was, I think that was what the biggest wheel spinning thing for me was that everything seemed out of synchronicity, because I've always lived my life in that magic, in that flow, in that adventurous synchronicity of life and the rich tapestry of people that we meet. And it's all amazing, And then that's where it felt like so icky to be out of that synchronicity, out of that flow. And it was just like, oh, yeah, well, maybe it was just a publishing house that was really out of integrity and they ripped me off, that there was that icky feeling, so that synchronicity of life is the magic, isn't it? And being in that flow and letting that go and letting all those synchronicity sort of feelings happen is magical.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And I'm so appreciative of you sharing your story today. Before we get into how people can find you, Trish, as you look back on the conversation we've had and what you've shared with us, what would you acknowledge yourself for?
Being brave, being resilient, just being courageous, I think, to push on through all the obstacles. I think, I'm proud of myself for doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we can definitely see how you have done that. And even just being here to share the story today, I would definitely acknowledge you for that. Very brave of you to share this with us. So thank you. Trish, where can people find you? We're going to put the information in the show notes with links, but if people want to learn more about you, talk to you about your story, or best case scenario, if they're interested in your book and your programs, where can people find you?
Probably the best place is my website. I share a bit about my story, about my transformational health journey on there, on TrishTucker-May.com, and across socials. I love sharing stuff, particularly on social media, Facebook particularly. I share a lot of good recipes there as well. So I'm always sharing some crazy juice recipe or smoothie recipe there as well. So be sure to look me up.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And we'll have that in the show notes. And before we let you go, the last thing I do this with all of my guests because I feel like it's really important. It's not only part of your story, but it's part of what we stand for here, which is lifting people up and giving people voices, or rather letting people have a space to use their voices, I should say. And I call it acknowledgments. And so, as you think about your circle and your life, who in your life would you like to acknowledge, give a voice to, boost, promote? That could be causes, organizations, it could be creators, individuals. Who would you like to acknowledge today?
Well, particularly Janie Lee Grace, and that's so synchronicitous that she's on tomorrow. So Janie runs the Sober Club here in the UK, and I've been sober curious now for 9 years, and I came across Janie's work Imperfectly Natural 5 years ago, and really started to listen to her podcast, The Sober for Life, and it's been very helpful to me in my journey with my self-esteem, my confidence to remain sober. Janie Lee Grace from Imperfectly Natural is the person that I really would like to give a shout out today.
Wonderful. And we'll have her links and description in the show notes. And we'll get to hear from her very soon as well. So, Trish, thank you so much. I so appreciate you being able to come on and sharing your story with us. And I look forward to talking to you more. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
What an honor and a privilege it is for me to witness these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way too. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. It can be magical to set aside your expectations and just let the thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper, and surprises can reveal themselves to you. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Meanwhile, be sure to like this episode and follow the podcast here on this platform. Also, follow me on social media at Off the Comma. Interact with the posts, share what you learned from each episode, or just share your thoughts about the topic in general. And check out my website for workshops, events, and updates. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.